also like building personas, right? When you have certain personas in mind, now at this point we already know when we decide whether or not it's a guest that we want to take on, we'll already know like, okay, we feel that this one can resonate and a lot of people will benefit from that conversation. So I would say like it's important to know your audience, know what their struggles are, know what their wants, what motivates them, what encourages them. That's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned so far.
The following is a long open conversation with Janice, Senior Manager of Career Development at the Asia School of Business and the co-host of the Actsplore podcast. We got a chance to sit and talk about many topics like what is human capital, how was management consulting in Hong Kong, how it's like co-hosting the Actsplore podcast, and her future work at the APAC region. This is On the Long with FVR podcast. If you like this thing, feel free to like and subscribe and to come through to the channel on the description below. And now with y'all, Janice.
That's good. The space.
Yeah, it's about right.
Okay.
And can you imagine that there's been a lot of rains recently?
It has, yeah. It's been raining almost every single day.
And it's like haze or something going on.
So true. I mean, it's important to stay healthy in this time of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, stay healthy. That was the
Yeah.
name of the game many episodes ago. I guess we can start.
Okay, let's do this.
All right, 3, 2, 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode on The Long with FVR. Today we have Jannice. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
Oh yes, especially at this time of the day, because all of a sudden we have the sunlight arising, we have the lights, all of a sudden the spaceship is still on.
It's
which is very
perfect. It's quiet. We've got good lighting. Well done on the location.
Oh yes, it took so many episodes to build this, especially with all the things. This is one of the main topics because at the beginning we thought, it's on the lawn, it's gonna be outdoors. But then we came out with this new place.
Yeah, I mean, technically, a lawn is just where people hang out, in a common space. So this could be an indoor lawn.
Mm-hmm.
That works as well.
So people may be watching it and they recognize the voice. It's like, wait a second, I heard that one before. So can you tell us a little more about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So I think what Fabian was referring to might be the podcast that I'm on. So I co-host a podcast along with my best friend Sarah Ann. But just a little bit more about myself. So my name's Janice. I guess where do I even begin? I mean, I'm Malaysian, born and bred Malaysian, and I started off my career as a lawyer. Did my studies in the UK, got called to the bar there. Always thought that I would, go on to pursue a life in law, as many aspiring young law students do. And then, along the way, I learned some realizations about myself, discovered that law really wasn't what I wanted to do. So I did my MBA at the Asia School of Business, and that's how I got to know you, Fabian, and then pivoted my career somewhere along the way, got into HR, and then management consulting, and then now I'm back in ASB as a career development office coach. So yeah, happy to talk more about that along the way, but in a nutshell, that's my journey.
That's quite a huge view because then we want to dive into what you mentioned, the beginnings. So how was your childhood growing up? Was here in KL or it was in another city? How were the dynamics? Can you tell us how was life back then?
So I think I grew up in a very stereotypical kind of like Asian household. My mom was a tiger mom. So it was me and my sister, and we were both, luckily for her, we were both very obedient kids. So she had us on a very tight schedule. We had very disciplined like timetables from the moment I get up, 7 in the morning, 6 something I think, all the way till I slept, 10. We would follow a very strict like timetable of like what time we'll go to school, what time we'll go to like tuition, which is like additional classes, and then what time we'll do our homework. So I lived a very, I think, disciplined life as a kid, and I was very quiet as well, very introverted kid. My parents were really kind. They provided me and my sister with like the best opportunities that we could have. For that, I'm very, very grateful. But, it was a very, I think, protected kind of childhood, very structured in a way, very disciplined, to the point that I think, even going into law, it was so hard for me to leave it eventually because I grew up with that mindset of like, you do go down that path. That's the trajectory. You study, you graduate, you get a really good job, get married, have kids, and then that's a trajectory. So it's been hard to sort of unwire that, but I guess that's some of your childhood does stay with you, but you do get to rewire those beliefs along the way as well.
It's a fascinating quote you mentioned. Some of your childhood remains with you. I guess this is the first time in the series because other guests mentioned that, yeah, it's good that you still have the child within you. And how you managed to keep the childhood with you, especially when you went to the degree?
I think it's hard to forget what you learn or the experiences that you went through as a kid, because there are some years that are so formative, right? That just stays in your memory. I think like even between the ages of especially even as young as like when you're 7, you do remember the kind of experience that you go through. Some of these, like for me especially, one thing that stayed with me, I've changed a lot since I was a kid, right? I was an extreme introvert to the point that I would like hide behind my mother's skirt when she introduced me to like a new friend. Now I'm no longer, thankfully, no longer as shy, painfully shy as that. But I think one thing that remained with me is the value of working to get what you want and working hard to get what you want. Because when I was young, I had a love for Barbie. Like, this is not a shameless plug, but for Barbie. But I love Barbie dolls so much. But my mom would never just buy me a doll. I would always have to like score, like how many straight A's, how many like marks and above. Then she'll be like, okay, then now I can buy you a gift. I can buy you like a new book. So I think that value of like working hard to get what you want and knowing that things don't come to you easily and that you have to earn, you have to work for what you want to get, that has like still remained with me till today. And when I went to school, even back in law school as well.
That's true. The concept of, hey, you don't deserve it, you earn it.
Yeah, you earn
That
it.
actually sticks with you. During your formative years, what made you say, I need to go to law? What happened?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when I was young, so like I told you, I was very quiet, right? And what I really spent a lot of my time doing was reading. So I was a massive nerd. I would just stay in my room, just like read all day long, shut myself off in the world. And I used to write a lot as well. So that love for reading and writing has been in me for many, many years, even as an introvert. But I think as I went towards like high school, that's where I got to join like a lot of extracurricular activities, took on some leadership roles in church, and I think that's when I stepped out of my shell and I got to exercise that like speaking muscle more and more, and I realized like, okay, I really enjoy like reading, writing, and I also got involved in debate club. So I think naturally one starts to think at that age, right? And you're not exposed to many things as a child generally in school. So I was like, okay, I love to read, write, I like to debate, I like to fight people sometimes. What could be a good way for me to bring all these like strengths and interests into a career? So with that sort of limited knowledge, I guess at that point of time, and you think, okay, law is also something that's like quite prestigious, all the influence of the movies and things like that, right? Ally McBeal, I'm sure some of you remember that. I decided, okay, I think law makes sense. So it was kind of like a process of elimination, coupled with a natural inclination of my strengths and my interests. And I did actually really enjoy law school. It's one of the most enjoyable periods of my life. So no regrets there, even though I eventually pivoted out of it. But really, really enjoyed like going to law school, did the bar training.
The call of the bar or the call to the bar, I believe, is different between the regions that you are supposed to be called or something.
Yeah.
Or the application. I guess we mentioned or discussed that with another episode in the past.
Willing, yeah?
Yeah, which is okay. You need to network your way to actually get your shot.
Yeah.
Once you are in the bar, what happens?
What happens at the bar?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is quite like this really, cryptic, vague concept, right? But essentially what happens is that there are 2 tracks, I think. So I did my studies in the UK, and in the UK you have 2 tracks, unlike here in Malaysia where it's fused, right? Whether it's the barrister or the solicitor, but in the UK it's 2 different tracks. And for me to practice in Malaysia as a lawyer, the sort of natural course was to do the bar professional training course, the DPTC, or the bar as you call it. So what happens is you go through, this kind of 1 year program. Along the way, you get to do a lot of advocacy training. So it's very different from law school because it's very practical. You get to exercise how do you like cross-examine someone, how do you, do examination in chief, how do you draft pleadings, for example. So very practical aspects of a lawyer's day-to-day job. And then in between, you get to do these things called dining, where you attend these dinners with judges, with like barristers, and you kind of converse with them. And we have all the students have to do like something like 10 dining sessions in a year.
10.
So that's where you get to do your networking, and then we have these like advocacy weekends. So at the end of everything, after you do that and you pass your exams, which were pretty challenging ones, then you can be called to the bar. And then depending on the region that you're at, you get to practice. So as a Malaysian, being called to the bar in the UK allowed me to practice here, which was why I kind of went down that path.
That's a good disclaimer because then all of a sudden a new avenue opens. And once you were here with your practicing license finally to do this, how was I would say, was like the movies or was different?
Oh my goodness, it was completely different from the movies. Sometimes I do like to watch it just for guilty pleasure, right? But it could not be further from the truth because in the movies, it seems that everyone, first of all, most of the focus of the movie revolves around the scandals and the law firm scandals and the courtroom drama. So in court, generally, the biggest myth is that like you're allowed to just sort of, slam the table and stand up and say, I object, or, that's ridiculous. In court, I mean, at least here in Malaysia anyway, it's always very civil. You always have to politely interject. There's no dramatic storming around. It's normally quite solemn, the whole process. In terms of how things play out in court, it's not even half as like exciting or dramatic as it is. And secondly, I think what the movies don't show is a lot of intensive work that goes on behind the scenes in order to even get to the hearing. In the movies, they're like, okay, you get the case, you talk to your witness, and then bam, you're off in court. In reality, we spend long hours, days, weeks sometimes working on the case before we even get our day in court. So quite a lot of misrepresentation there, but it's still fun to watch.
So during those times, I believe the volume of work was very intense because when you are in court, it's the tip of the iceberg. But then everything that comes behind must be very, very heavy detail. Which was one of the most difficult parts that you faced during those due diligence or the cross-examinations? It was the source of data, or it was the speed to do that, or it was the scheduling? How was that?
Which was the most difficult part? And that is, like, even as I think about it now, I struggle to tell you, like, the one part of it because the whole process, I mean, I'm no longer in law, but I'd appreciate the process, right? And each part of it is so painstakingly challenging in its own way, like from researching the points of law to gathering the information, getting the source of truth, coming up with that finalized pleading, to even getting to the stage in court. But I guess personally for me, the most challenging part isn't in the courtroom because by then all the work would have been done. I think the hardest one was coming up with like the most compelling case, especially sometimes if the case is not strong and you just have to find, use your legal intellect and creativity to just, to articulate the best argument possible for your client. Like I think that is probably the most difficult part because it involves that, good mix of like case knowledge, creativity, and just ability to sort of like think outside the box while being, definitely aligned with the law. So, yeah, the building the case part is hard.
That's true. Usually building something takes time, especially when something is good. Usually takes even longer. A career in law. Then all of a sudden, something happened and you pivoted. What happened? And how you started your career as management consultant?
Yeah, how do I even condense it? Well, the TLDR story is that, I went in very bright-eyed, very determined to basically, go through the motions and have a very successful career, right? I think most people go in with that intention. But I think what had happened was, I did enjoy the learnings, and I think that it was something that definitely stretched me a lot as a working professional, especially at like that young age. But I think what happened along the way was, a bit of context, right? I went into litigation, and I specialized at a very early stage, so kind of in that niche. I was doing tax litigation, so very, very specific area of law. And I think I came to realize that actually litigation isn't aligned with my personality. As I kind of told you earlier, right? As a child, I enjoyed debating and things like that. But I think as I grew older, my personality became a lot more peaceful, harmonious, and I always wanted to find both parties to come to a peaceful resolution rather than to be super adversarial in court. So in that sense, it was already sort of misaligned with my personality. And I think when I did a deeper level of reflection, I just couldn't see myself practicing law, and especially in the area of litigation, for many more decades, because I couldn't find that level of excitement about the subject area that I was in, even though it was very intellectually, satisfying, and I did enjoy elements of it. But when I did a deeper thought, I was like, is this something I could see resonating with my personality, my interest, my passion, who I am as a person, that inclination for peace and whatnot? I just couldn't really see that. And to be successful in a career like that involves a great deal of investment, of your time, of your effort, you have to give all of you. It's a very consuming profession. So I felt like, okay, scary as it is, it's no longer what I could see myself doing. And I was thinking, okay, I know that's not what I want, but where do I go to the next path? So I think this is where a lot of, cosmic like timing, the people around you, all those things came into play, because my best friend, at the time, she was also doing the MBA course, and she then told me, like, Janice, I know you're thinking about options. Why not explore doing the MBA here at ASB? So I had a lot of imposter syndrome at that time. I was like, I was still so young, all I knew was law. What could I contribute in an MBA classroom? So I had a lot of doubts, but I think she kind of gently encouraged me along the way and say, you know what, like, just shoot your shot. The worst case scenario is you get rejected. Best case scenario is you get a chance to open some doors and explore something beyond law. So I thought about it, and I agreed. I was like, okay, you know what? I'm just gonna shoot my shot. Just gonna give it a try and see where things go. So yeah, long story short, managed to get in, and had one of the most incredible 20 months of my life so far. Met amazing people, opened the door to so many different opportunities. Got to explore the world of HR, ops, just to name a few, and then eventually got to move to Hong Kong after the MBA, got a post-MBA opportunity there, and I think that's where my career in, human capital, in management consulting, that's where it really began, because I think all it took was that, in that moment, like saying to myself, okay, you know what, I have nothing much to lose, let's take that leap of faith. Like, what's the worst that could happen? The upside was so high, but the downside was very low in that sense, right? It's about taking calculated risk as well. At that point of time, I could take that risk and decided to just listen to my gut in that sense. So that's how I kind of pivoted out of law, and then went to the world of HR and then management consulting subsequently after.
This is very encouraging, because how many times I've been sitting here with former lawyers that they waited like 10 years until they finally make the move, or other people who literally in 2 years are like, enough. But you were actually trying to break that echo chamber with the help of a friend. The encouragement to say, there might be something going on outside. Now, Hong Kong, what have you seen there?
What have I seen there? It's, I can't even summarize it, in a way that justifies and that does it justice, because Hong Kong is a place that I feel, it's very different than what you would see in the media, right? Especially, it's gone through a lot of political turbulence, health-wise as well with the pandemic. It's a city that really suffered at the hands of the pandemic, So how I would summarize it is, it's an incredible mixture of East meets West, right? It's a city that has, that the British colonial roots, and at the same time it's so rich in that, you know, Hong Kongese kind of culture, and it's very in your face as well. I don't know, have you been to Hong Kong before? Twice. Would you agree with me? It's very loud, it's very in your face, there's so much going on, and it kind of feels almost like a New York of the East.
No, it's not a New York. It's not New York.
A little bit.
Okay, how can I summarize? Comedian Tim Dillon from New Jersey says, life in the big city. But it's not because it's live, you see the bright lights, no, it's because it's going to be in your face. It's like you really need to be after, otherwise it will be after you. And that's how I felt Hong Kong. It has the vibe of New York, at the same time it's clean. Because New York is there, let's be honest. You don't see the hot dog carts, but you have a lot of options. And of course, you see a lot of the security thing going on. It's a cash society, and when I want to focus on that element is because you need to carry cash to use the octopus card.
Yeah, that's true. It's not as that was surprising for me actually. It wasn't as cashless as I thought it would be. So you do end up having to carry quite a lot of cash. But I think since the last year that I've been away from Hong Kong, and when I came back, I was pleasantly surprised to see that more places have adopted this sort of cashless way of transaction. But it is an exciting place to be, I will say, especially for working professionals who are looking to sort of elevate their careers and to see broaden new horizons. And especially people in like the finance industry, right? Because it really is the hub here in Asia, arguably. Some say Singapore, but I think my time there was definitely it was fantastic to say the least. And what people don't really know about Hong Kong as well is that it's beyond just a concrete jungle. There's so much more to it, right? There's all that nature, there's those like sprawling mountains or the hiking trails, islands.
If you allow me to interrupt, you have Violet Hill, you have the Dragon's Back, you have the Lion's Rock.
Well, very good. So you went on all those hikes when you were there?
Yeah.
Amazing.
And it's one thing the island that actually has all the nature, and another thing is the big city. Usually every day at 8 p.m. there is like the lights and everything.
Oh, yeah.
There is of course the boats going around, and you will see that from the Bruce Lee statue, which is like from the city side, you can see the mountains. And okay, that's something that you can actually take account. A lot of fashion, a lot of finance, a lot of industries going on. It's like a gateway. And one last element that I can include is talking with people who has been studying and living in China. Right there is very digital, like in a way to make the payments and everything. And we can recall our time talking with Rebecca, who was one of the previous guests. Every time that she goes to Singapore, it's like she feels a little rough to use the notes.
Oh.
And it's like, and I had to show my wallet. You are saying that my wallet is a relic of the past? Yes. And to see that in Hong Kong, despite being very modern, it still embrace those elements that makes you say, hey, I understand this place. Given that background, in management consulting for the human capital, can you help us understand what human capital is? Because when we hear, finance capital, that's money. But human capital, what is that?
I think human capital, it's really centered on the idea that people are your assets, right? People are assets and resources, not just headcount in a company.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the idea of, I guess the area and the scope of human capital. And there's a lot to it actually, but essentially I would say that's the idea.
Understood. And during that time, I believe it was not only in Hong Kong, the projects, but mostly everywhere, right?
Yeah, so I actually did my work in human capital consulting here in Malaysia. In Hong Kong, I was actually specifically in human resources. So in a way, it's a bit different. HR in-house for a beauty company, and then moving back to Malaysia to be in a management consulting firm focused on human capital. But yeah, I would say generally the way things work in Southeast Asia and in Hong Kong, the mindset, it's very, very different in the way from what I've seen so far, just in terms of the makeup of the society, right? Because here in Malaysia, even just between the Southeast Asian regions, there are a lot of nuances because in Malaysia it's very it's a multicultural society, right? So it's in a way the diversity makeup is different as compared to Hong Kong, where it's depending what company you're in, which area of Hong Kong you're in, there's a lot of expats as well who come from all over Europe, all over US. In Malaysia, we don't really see so much of that, right? In the companies that I've worked with, it's mostly I would say local Malaysians, but just among the local Malaysians, there are Chinese, Malay, Indians, a diverse mix. So just in terms of the composition, it's very different. The way of working, the attitude. There are little nuances here and there.
It's a good differentiator that you're mentioning because one thing is the diversity of looks and the other thing is the diversity of thinking, and then element number 3 will be the diversity of action.
Yeah.
Talking about the diversity of action, both in Hong Kong and Malaysia, what made you say was the most difficult compromise you did, and why was it?
Most difficult compromise in terms of like professional.
Yeah, or personally, I don't know.
Okay.
It's up to you.
This is a really interesting one. I think so the reason why I struggle to answer this question is because, thankfully I haven't had to struggle or make a compromise on an ethical front. But I think how I see it is that it's important for you, like me as a person, to be adaptable while keeping true to my nature, right, in whatever environments that I'm in. So if let's say, I'm in like working in Malaysia, there's a lot of nuances where I cannot be as direct and like very, very straightforward to people because I think as Malaysians, we are very friendly people, but at the same time, we don't appreciate people who are overly direct, right? Whereas when I was in Hong Kong, what I noticed was that people are super direct, right? And after working in Malaysia for years, it was a bit of a that's a culture shock, and like, are they scolding me? Like, sometimes you feel a bit like, is there something wrong that I did? But I think after you're there for a while, I start to realize that, okay, this is their way of working. They like to get stuff done very fast, very efficiently. So in order for me to adapt well to the environment, I have to get over my need for like politeness and like, not being direct, sometimes beating around the bush. I had to stop doing that, right? I had to adapt to their way of working, to be, on that same level, to be able to get stuff done. And in that, they don't see it as offending anyone. They're just like, I'm just helping you, I'm just getting the job done. So I guess it was a compromise in a way where I had to, compromise my natural tendencies for like being very gentle, like doing things in a very diplomatic way and just trying to get stuff done in the best way possible for, for both parties.
That's actually very clear. And that reminds me of a quote. Clear boundaries create good neighbors. And it's like, okay, if I'm upfront to you, it's not because I despise you, it's because I want to be as clear as possible so there is a clear boundary and we can be good neighbors.
That's right, yeah.
And it's better to be that way than, for example, the other side of the coin, which is like, oh no, we cannot do it now, but let's do it later. Or we can recall right now, talking from the podcast point of view, when I invite a guest and then they say, no, let's not do it now, let's do it when we are in MIT. And then in MIT, it's like, no, let's not do it now, let's do it back in KL. And then, let's do it right now. Right now the homework is too tight, the deadline. Let's do it once we graduate. And then, no, we cannot do it now, I'm leaving, but hey, let's do it when you're back.
So it's not being direct, right? It's like kind of beating around the bush. And this reminds me of a quote that I've heard from someone, which is that clarity is kind. So whoever it is could have just told you directly. Like,
his name is Rishaf. Let's be honest. Oh yeah.
Okay.
I'm very honest.
All right.
Or let's
called out.
Or let's call out. Let's call out the other working professional.
Oh no! Don't say that.
Because thanks to their
controversy increases views. Okay.
Thanks to their controversies and their opposition, I took that as a fuel to say, I'm not one to prove you wrong. I just want to prove myself right. That dedicating to this can lead to something. like all the other working professionals like Jarad Ma, Desmond Chang, Lukman, and
oh
the
dear.
others.
Open up the floodgates.
Because then you see the other people who are very direct. Like, for example, Imran, who literally was like, let's do it. I was not even thinking about it. Or, let's say, other friends that
Shout
were,
out.
for example, Rose, who literally was like, yeah, let's do it. And in fact, we were carrying our chairs to do it in front of the National Monument. That was episode 20.
Amazing.
So you see, when there is a will, there is a way.
Yeah.
And of course, there was people who told me, no, I can't, and they gave me their reasons.
Okay, yeah, which is fair, which is
Oh, yeah.
reasonable, yeah. So be clear, you know, because that is something kind that you can do to someone
Oh,
rather than
yeah.
to lead them on. So
Oh yeah, I mean, imagine if somebody says, yes, let's do the meeting on February 30. There is no February 30.
oh man,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hope I never use that one. I hope. Now, talking about your time in this, all of a sudden you realize that, well, I'm doing a lot of these projects. What made you say, well, now it's time to become a coach?
so I so in my time as a management consultant, it wasn't I didn't have any particular sort of push factor, so to speak, right? I really enjoyed the challenges, especially going from very HR centric to now being like in the same company, serving the same client, to then going to consulting where you're exposed to a breadth of topics, industries, and clients from different regions. So I was learning a lot in very short spans of time. But I think the sort of love and passion for coaching was something that I had developed, especially like during the MBA and then slightly thereafter, where I really had the privilege to kind of be mentored, be coached by really seasoned and really amazing coaches, right? So I felt that a lot of my sort of personal growth and professional growth could be attributed to these coaches, and during these sessions where I discovered like, okay, these were the areas I needed to work on, what were some things that they were reflecting back to me for me to really improve on. So given the sort of the benefits that I gained from all of these coaches in my life, right, I felt that this was something that I really felt passionate, and in a way I felt a bit called to do as well, to pursue and to undertake. And I think the confirmation for me was when I got to be a part of this sort of peer-to-peer coaching program in my former company. And it was a bit daunting at first because I was coaching sort of senior executives that were like 10, 20 years older than me. But still, we were all in this program, right? And we were asked to do peer-to-peer coaching for each other. So, I share my problem, they share theirs, and we try to coach each other using a specific like coaching framework and technique. And even though I was like, okay, what could this seasoned executive possibly learn from me? That feedback I got after this one session was like, Janice, I really see that you have something there. You've helped me achieve this breakthrough, and I feel so much clarity now after months of carrying that sort of problem with me. And they were like, you have this gift and you have this skill to coach. So I think that encouraged me to let's pursue this. Let's see what's there. And I think given the current role that I'm in, it does give me the opportunity to also further hone that muscle and to do that in that capacity. So it's a mix of like sort of trying to respond to that calling, I think, and also to try to expound upon this skill and this technique. And I do think that that one-on-one direct impact that you can have on a person, hopefully not to give them the answers, but to help them just examine within themselves and to come to realizations of what it is that they need to do to get to the next level. I find that personally quite rewarding. So yeah, I think that's why I decided to make that transition.
And with that piece of information in your hand, I believe there was enough bravery to say, I can do this on my own and take the leap of faith. So how was those very last days on your former company once they actually learned that you were moving?
Yeah.
How was those very last days?
Thankfully, it was not ugly, obviously. It was I had really, obviously very good working relationship with my colleagues. I'm still close to them. So it was really celebratory in a way, right? People were very, a lot of my colleagues who know me well, those who know me were like the response that they gave to me was like, oh yeah, it totally makes sense that you will be going down this path because they know what my interests are, they know my strengths, and so generally it was a very supportive environment. Well, it was bittersweet on my end though because I really enjoyed working with the team, right? And when you're in a I guess in an industry like consulting where it's so intense and you have very very short turnaround time sometimes and you're working against the clock, you form a sort of bond with these people, right? In a way they become your comrades in battle. And so I really enjoyed the team culture. I really liked the people I was working with. So even though I was excited to pursue new opportunities, I was very sad to leave and to say goodbye to these people who I've had the privilege to learn from over the my course there.
But you will see them again, like
Yeah, of course. I know, yeah. No, it's different though, because work obviously we'll remain friends always, but it's that ending the relationship on the working colleagues kind of front. But you're right. I think that's a good point. I will see them again.
Oh yeah, because this is something that I usually have a small debate every time somebody wants to say in Spanish, like adios. Adios is goodbye. Like hey,
like forever.
I will see you again.
Okay.
But it's like hey, see you later. It's like nos vemos or hasta luego. Okay, that's better. That's the more practical.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it's like, wait a second, I'm actually gonna see that person at lunch. But what is going on?
Fair, yeah.
Now, this is one of the sides of Jannice. But there is another side you briefly talked, the podcasting. So, how that entrepreneurship started?
Yeah, so my best friend and I, Sarah, we when we were students at the MBA here at ASB, she was the one who actually started the ASB podcast. So shout out to you, Sarah. And after she graduated, me, my friends, my classmates, Amelia, Crespo, Rory, we took over the podcast and continued it. And I think that was where that love and curiosity for podcasting really began for me, right? I think by nature, both of us, Sarah and myself, were generally very curious people, and similar to yourself, we love asking people about like what drives them, what motivates them, and so we felt that okay, after leaving ASB, could there be a chance to restart this project again, but this time on our, from our own sort of accounts, right? Our own by our own nature. So this really came about during the pandemic. I will say. We both kind of weirdly, individually decided that, why not pick up the podcasting project again? And we only discovered that we both wanted to do it when we had a conversation one day. So the natural thing to do then was to combine forces because we were like, you want to do it, I want to do it. And we both, we have great chemistry, but let's start this project together. And so we did this in the midst of the pandemic. That time I was based in Hong Kong, she was in Malaysia, so we had to do the podcast virtually, right? But the blessing in disguise for that was that we could get a lot of guests who were international, and at the time, it was during the pandemic, most people were kind of like stuck at home anyway, so we didn't have too much friction, I think, inviting the first few guests, because I think as a podcaster, as a content creator, you will also resonate, right? Like getting people to appear on your podcast, especially in episode 1 to 5, is always a little bit more difficult because they don't have track record, right? They don't know, what's your vibe, what's the kind of direction of your podcast. So they're saying yes to you as like a leap of faith in a way, right? They have to just believe in you and your vision. So that was the beginnings of our podcast, and it was really driven by that curiosity in people and the love and the want to spread, I think, insights on how people can elevate themselves professionally, personally, and to do that on a wider platform. Because I could be having this conversation with you in Ben's downstairs over a cup of coffee, but if you were to share something so profound to me, it's selfish for me to just keep it to myself. Like I want to share it with the world too. At least that's what we both we both had in mind. So that's why we decided to capture all these insights in a podcast. And it's also a fun way for us to as well get to know people, and so we've had a chance to do it in person now, thankfully, in the studio. So that has really taken, I think, the podcast, our podcasting game to the next level, because I think interviewing people in person is a different ballgame. So kudos to you for that, because you're not behind a screen. We can't see our list of questions. You really just have to just go based on what the other person is saying live on the spot like that. So I would say it's been almost 2 years since we've started the podcast. 1 year and 10 months or so now, and it's been so much fun. We got to do an in-person community hangout with our podcast listeners, and it was such a privilege to hear what people resonated with, and fingers crossed we get to do this for a very long time to come. But I'm really enjoying it so far.
So what is the next stage? Are you going to be selling merch? Are going to be like new exclusive events like the Sarah and Janice Summit?
Yeah, manifest that. I will say I'm not close to the idea of that. In fact, that is something that we would potentially want to do. More in-person events for sure, because our first one it went really, really well and we had really positive feedback. So definitely more speaking engagements where we get to interact with our community face to face. Merch potentially, I mean, we've started printing like cups. We did give away some of those to our audience. So potentially, stay tuned to find out. The audience like, wow, shameless promo.
I can imagine right now these promos like Theo Von, that is like, okay, take attention to these new merch, be good with yourself, these new colors, new editions. And
yes.
It's like, I can imagine those things going on.
I'm not plugging any link below, don't worry.
Or any discount code.
No, not yet. But if we do have some, y'all know where to go to.
That's fantastic. It's true that to bring people to make this, at the beginning they say, where is the volume of work? The first 5 or 10 people is like, where it is. They want to see, okay, which is a format, which is dynamic. When I began to mention that it was in person, some people were like, okay, where? Do you have your studio? And it's like, I don't have a studio. And when I show them that I have the small tripod and the actual phone, it's like, are you sure actually that works? And I say, yeah. We got some episodes already recorded.
Yeah.
I wanted to study this so many years before, but there was so much instability or so much stuff going on. I actually began some pre-recorded episodes back in November. Actually, episode 25, it was recorded right outside of a supermarket.
No way, really?
Yeah, it was right outside of the supermarket.
Wow.
Like it was a Thursday night, November 3rd. Wait a second, it was December 3rd, 2021. Or their other episodes are hidden by nature because they decide, okay, let's keep this as a personal. Episode 7 was actually recorded in an apartment, but because we have a view, okay, it helped. Of course, I began to see an evolution of how to handle the interviews, because at the beginning it was like, okay, maybe 30 minutes and that's it, and then it was let the guests talk because it's about the guests. And then all of a sudden, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and it's like, okay, it's about the guest.
Would you do audio only, or is your thing like fully video?
I wanted to keep it as a video because people appreciate the body language.
I see.
Because you see, okay, one thing is the tone of the voice, but how the person is saying it. Is that person comfortable or is that person defensive? And even if you don't read between the lines, the body helps you to read what those lies in between them. That's one thing. And then, number 2, I got some proposals to do episodes on audio only, but then I have to recall what Bill Owlet mentioned in the past, the Lamborghini dealership experiment.
Yes, I remember that.
And he was the first one to test me. Did you learn what I teach you, Fabian? Did you learn what I teach you about the Lamborghini dealership exercise? We can repeat what was the whole thing. So there was this setup that the Lamborghini ownership was trying to sell Lambos, and then all of a sudden has a maintenance with 2 mechanics, but there was no Lamborghinis coming in, and the mechanics were bored, and all of a sudden a friend of yours arrives with a Volvo, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna help you. Can you give some oil change to my Volvo? And the question is, what do? You say yes to that job, or you say no? And the lesson was that you have to say no, because that diminishes your value. You're supposed to be out there hunting for those people who will buy your Lamborghini so they can go to the mechanics that you actually own. And that was one of the first things I learned from Bill Owlet, to the point that when I asked him, he was like, okay, let's do the episode, but it's going to be on Zoom. And he already knew that I was always doing this on person.
Yeah.
And I was like...
So it's just a test.
And I was like, we have to do it in person. He was like, you learn well.
Well done.
So,
No, I agree. You have to keep to your, your USP, right? In this case, it is your video setup, you interviewing the guests, face to face in person, and if that means having to compromise, if it means having to let go some of the opportunities, then I think so be it. But in your case, it's staying very true to your values, and what your your video content stands for, which I think is great.
of course, there has been critics that I welcome very well, which is what about the microphone quality or the audio quality or the camera quality? And when they see the actual setup, which is a random Motorola phone and a microphone that barely works, it's like we just find a place. It adds the element of flexibility.
I respect the hustle though. I also was like when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's so cute. Like your setup was.
So you were expecting like where are the headphones?
No, I did my research. Okay, I did my homework. I tuned into your episode, so I have an idea
Okay.
of what to expect. But no,
Oh
I respect the
yeah,
hustle.
that explains who has been watching my episodes recently.
It was me.
That's good to know. So, given that a background, which were the things that you learned from the podcast adventure that is telling you, oh, I can apply this to business?
Very, very good question, actually. I think the biggest thing, there are so many lessons, and I feel like I could like speak on a whole episode, about this. But I think one of the key things I've learned is you have to know your audience, and I think that can be applied to business, right? Because you have to know who you're selling to. If not, you would just be, it just be self-indulgent, like Sarah Ann and myself just talking about things that we like, and talking to an abyss because like no one else resonates, which isn't the way to take your podcast forward. So for us, I think we do try to get to know our audience. We try to understand like what are their struggles, what is it that they want to hear about, who are the guests that they would really love to listen from, and then from there we also have to calibrate it internally. Does that align with our values? Does it align to our podcast brand? And if there is a good fit, then that's the kind of content that we choose to release. And I think when you know your audience well, you start to understand. It's also like building personas, right? When you have certain personas in mind, now at this point we already know when we decide whether or not it's a guest that we want to take on. We'll already know like, okay, we feel that this one can resonate, and a lot of people will benefit from that conversation. So I would say like it's important to know your audience, know what their struggles are, know what their wants, what motivates them, what encourages them. That's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned so far.
That is paramount because many people will say, oh, there are two people that are talking, they are not working, it's like it's just a wasted time. But in fact, what you learn here, you can easily transfer to something of what is adding more and more value in the near term or even in the long term.
What about for you? I'm curious to know, like.
So I took inspiration from Joe Rogan and Lex Friedman. This is going to trigger a lot of liberals because they say, why are you hearing Joe Rogan? It's like, hey, what do you want me to do? But also Lex Friedman, who I learned a lot from his episodes. And it was a way not only to discover, but also document and learn from business lessons from people who have been coming across. Because that's one thing. And also another element I realized was listening. It helps you to practice. It helps you to, okay, time scheduling, let people talk, don't interrupt, add something to the conversation. That kind of practice helps a lot, especially because there are moments that you know by practice when to answer or when to say, let the people keep talking, let the people keep talking, and they begin to give more and more information. So that has been number two. A side effect that I didn't expect is that some people will begin to say, oh, this is a nice way to network. All of a sudden people are trying to see, oh, look at that. What have you been doing? One of the common questions I have during interviews has been like, okay, I know an MBA, whatever. What else have you been doing? And when they say, oh, so you have a channel. Oh, they talk about these topics. Okay, let's talk. And it helps a lot.
It makes you a lot more interesting as a person and a lot more well-rounded. I couldn't agree more with you. I think my perspectives on life and in general has broadened so much from just conversations with people, right? Like getting to know their world, what they're about. That has also expanded my own horizons as well.
Now,
Yeah.
this is one side to say, oh, I want to diversify, I want to be more interesting. And some people will say, oh, that's only for few people, and like, I'm not that interesting. Okay, let's assume for a moment you're unidimensional. Let's assume for a moment you only want one thing and one thing only. Through your own documentation, you add the element of time, and you will see how you are evolving, how you are taking things different. Like when you're practicing a martial art and you want to specialize, let's say, in judo or jiu-jitsu or taekwondo, it's only one thing. It's very specific. And then added the practice and added the element of time, you begin to realize, I've begun to be blue belt, purple belt, black belt, first dan or second dan. And then you begin to see, the practice actually makes things better. So even taking the two polar opposites of being unidimensional or being very interesting, quote unquote, still the element of time through your own documentation is like, yeah, I guess it was worth the risk to practice all of this.
Yeah, it's that taking tiny steps, right? Every day, just putting in the work, recording, an episode every week, and it's just the grind that will just ultimately help you see like, oh, I went from level like 0 and level 1, when you first start podcasting, you sometimes don't know, what's the right question to ask, what's the right cadence to pause and let people talk, to eventually learning and slowly starting to master the art of carrying out a good conversation.
Now,
I'm aligned.
if you allow me to add a little more, how many times we have been through our lives without even noticing how we actually sound or how we actually look like when somebody is recording? And it's like, oh, this is how I look in a video camera, or this is how I sound in a video camera. This is how I sound to other people. And it's like, yes, you can practice on this. And that helped a lot. So those have been kind of reflections that I hope to continue as long as
Awesome.
things are building this
Yeah.
way.
Keep going, man.
Yeah, one day will people start to see, oh, there is budget improvement. That's another thing. because because I felt the pressure
hear
of
you.
putting money on this, and it's like, wait a
Yeah.
second, this is still cash positive, okay?
It is. Oh, is it? Still cash positive?
Yeah, it's
Investment in mics and
Yeah, I mean, this
Well, it's
vest,
lo-fi, it's lo-
this vest
yeah.
was already into the books like a gift. So I put that. This vest
wardrobe
alone.
is.
This vest alone was literally when the moment that everything began to go up. By the way, I can disclose. People have been asking about it. This was not bought. It was given by David Capodelupo after episode 13. We were on the office of the global programs,
Yeah.
and then he was, "Do you want a cap?" It's like, "No, I still have hair." And it's like, "Okay, Fabian, you need to help me because I have a lot of T-shirts.
Oh,
Nobody's
bless.
getting them." And it's like, "No, I don't want T-shirts." It's like, "Okay, have this vest." I was like, "I want that one, yeah."
Wow.
And it's like, "Okay." And then it was, "I have this jumpsuit." The other jumpsuit I usually wear on the other episodes.
Also given.
Yes.
Oh my goodness, your wardrobe is sponsored. Pretty much.
Yes, by
Oh, wow.
MIT Management and Global
Shout
Programs.
out.
And thank you, David. And then I can disclose this because a lot of water already passed by. So then he asked me this question, Fabian, do you have a woman in your life? And I was like, that's my mother, yes. And he was like, no, Fabian, I'm talking,
Like a lady.
yes.
Yeah.
Do you have a lady in your life? Like, oh, yes, I do. And then he opens one of those racks in the closet, and it was like a place full of envelopes. Those envelopes were actually a scarf, and he handed me a scarf, the
my
MIT
goodness.
scarf, and he was like, "Okay, give to that lady that scarf, and tell that person, okay, it was a
Oh.
gift." Okay, thank you. Later, I knew that you cannot buy those items.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
It's not even in like the
In
MIT cook.
No, it's not. Because I remember when I was in Cambridge, I wanted to buy a vest,
Yeah.
but I only found the
The
jacket.
long sleeve, yeah.
And the jumpsuits were actually very hard to find, and it was easily sold out. And the scarf, like, very difficult.
Impossible. Oh my goodness.
I remember that months later passed by, and it was Suzanne who actually asked Rod Garcia to get one of the scarves. So he was pushing, and David is like, "Can you get me one of those?" that happened.
Amazing. The power of, when you open yourself up to networking, and you never know what the universe may bring back to you.
Now, let's analyze from the sad side. The name was supposed to be on the lawn because I remember doing these recordings. Well, it was not recording, but sitting with friends on the grass of Allen Parkway Park, and then it was like, it's a podcast, and it was. I wanted to have that idea back in 2018, 2019, but I didn't have the chance to find the equipment. And it's a little sad that from all the episodes I did, the only one that was done sitting on the grass
lawn.
was episode 14 with Jiren in front of the MIT Dome.
wow.
And it was a cautionary tale because doing something in the nature, you are in the nature, and the nature reminds you where
That
you are.
What happened?
So if you see the episode, you will realize that we are sitting in one of those small little picnic carpets that I brought, and the grass was fine, but the weather was starting to drop in temperature because it was on Thursday, May 12th, around 6:30.
Okay, so it's getting really cold.
At the end of the episode, we began to actually look like dragons because it was like it was cold. You were seeing the smoke, and
Oh
it's
my
like, yeah,
goodness.
I know that the feeling is good, the talk is nice, but we need to count.
Wow, I need to tune into that episode.
Oh yeah, it's kind of nice because
Okay.
you see the background,
Yeah,
and
it's
that
a
was,
beautiful background. I mean, with the dome.
and you saw like people playing, or you would see dogs passing
It
by,
would have been noisy, I would imagine, right? Like barking in the background. And
barking in the background. There was traffic on the front, but
like honk.
but you hear, okay, that's how the city sounds like.
I see.
And that was an element I wanted to bring.
Okay, very natural, sort of like one with
Episode,
nature.
like episode 20 with Rose, in front of the National Monument. You see in the background everybody who wants to take a picture with the monument. It was Sunday, 8 o'clock in the morning. So you see the dynamics. And we had to cut it short because there was the practice of the airplanes because of the National Day was
Oh
coming.
my goodness.
And then Rose was like, "Oh, look at that! This is gonna be Tom Cruise on the plane." He's like, "No, it's not gonna be him there." But
Oh my
they
goodness.
were getting very loud.
I can only imagine.
Uh-huh. It was fun.
So I think this is a good sweet spot then, because you've got pretty, I mean, we can hear noises here and there, like clanking about, but generally I think it's quite, it's as good as it gets, right, in terms of audio.
Especially because it sounds and it shows the building is alive. Because the last thing you want is that the building it has so nice architecture, but then all of a sudden you hear the train, or you hear the birds, and it's like, wait a second, is somebody actually there?
Yeah.
And now, let me add another element, which is the position of where we are in the universe. Because right now you're receiving sunlight.
Yeah.
You know that it takes 8 minutes from the closest star to come to planet Earth.
Okay.
That's what it takes the lights to come here.
Right.
And the position, because usually this angle is only available in the morning. In the afternoon, it goes the other way around, and it illuminates part of the lower ceiling. That episode with Aju, it shows in the later part of the episode how the sunlight is actually changing the ceiling color,
I see.
which was a good homage to her because she studied aerospace engineering. So it was okay. You design rockets, you go to space. Okay, that's
Very
a nice thing to add. Now, given that you've been in many regions, I need to ask, which has been the little differences that you've seen?
Between like Hong Kong and UK, Malaysia.
Uh-huh.
Ooh. Where do I even begin? I think there's a lot of difference between each of these regions. Little regions, little differences. I think the biggest thing, well, I'll take it from a personal level, right? Because I think there's a lot of things we look at it from a macro perspective. There are nuances of like the way people do business, the way the way people interact, the way transactions happen and things like that. But I think for me the biggest difference is just ease of mobility. So personally for me, I really dislike driving. In Malaysia, you have to drive everywhere though. because we don't have public transport that is end to end. So generally, in the city center, as you would, see the trains, they work, but it only runs up to a certain distance, right, between connecting, one part of the city to another part of the city. Um, and unfortunately, we don't have, it's because of how big I think the land is. It's very difficult to make sure that there are proper um, access to train entrances from different parts of the city. And unfortunately, we don't have roads that support that. We don't have pedestrian friendly, pavements and things like that that allow people to just walk from, their offices, for example, to the train station. So actually, to be fair, I think the city center is still pretty decent. But when you go out of the city center a little bit, then you have to take a grab car to the train station to then get to your location. So it's just not seamless in that sense. Transport infrastructure is very much still like a work in progress here in Malaysia. Whereas when when I was living in Hong Kong, possibly due to the size of the city itself, the transport network is so vast and so it stretches on even at like areas that are in more outskirt areas. You can get anywhere literally from one corner of Hong Kong to the mountains just simply by hopping onto the transport network, and it takes you like less than 45 minutes to get you from your home to the foot of a mountain, right? And I love that about Hong Kong, and the same for London as well, right, in the UK. So it's so easy to get anywhere. You don't really get bogged down by traffic, unlike here in Malaysia where like we're constantly held up by traffic, and for me personally, I feel like I have to plan my life around traffic. But after a while, you do just kind of get used to it. You work around it as well, because what good is there to complain, right? You just sort of work around it and you just manage your time in that sense. But I think that's one of the biggest differences on a very personal capacity that I've observed, which is that it's not easy to get to places. You have to do a lot of prior planning. Even the choice of locations that you choose to meet people has to be very strategic, because you don't want to be caught in a particular area at a particular time, compared to when you're in Hong Kong, where I think in a sense anywhere is possible. You can meet someone in Central, even though you're in Kowloon, and you can just say like, let's go grab a coffee in 30 minutes, and you'll both be there because you're not affected by traffic, because everyone just takes a train. So I think ease of transport, ease of getting around, mobility is one of the biggest differences that I've seen, having lived in Hong Kong, having lived in London as well.
It is quite remarkable because the easiness to hop, and even not into the trains, but the bus system in Hong Kong is like you are just waiting there, sitting, and then it takes you to the place. It's something that it feels like a legacy system, because when you see other places, why they need to build this new bullet train just to make things happen. It's also telling a story of how things were done in the past that are being honored through the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, talking about time, I believe that we have been sharing a lot of stories, and there's going to be some young people watching this. Among some of them, there's going to be some young Jannice watching this. So I need to ask you, what piece of advice will you give to your younger self?
I think the piece of advice I'll give to the younger Janice is that your introversion is not a weakness. In fact, it is a superpower. I think as a child growing up, being very painfully shy, I always felt like, I didn't want to put myself out there. So does that mean that I will not succeed in life, right? But later on, I eventually got out of my introverted shell. But I think just learning to appreciate that, for the introverts out there, your ability to observe, your ability to listen well, and your ability to empathize, in a world that's so noisy and so loud, that is a superpower, and that is your strength. So I would tell young Janice that like it's okay to be introverted and shy. Like eventually, like that will serve you. This is also to my fellow introverts out there. You got what it takes. You have what it takes. So just embrace yourself. Be unabashedly. Be authentically you.
Janice, I cannot find a better way to close this episode. How can people find you?
I will say Instagram. That's the easiest way to find me at Janice TY, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Janice Tan Ying.
Thank you very much for doing this. I really enjoyed this episode.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Really thoughtful questions.
And for people out there, please stay safe and see you when I see you. Bye. Bye. And that's it.